understand what a parasite is? You may think you know what it is, but do you know what these worms can do to your gut microbiome? Are they safe? Any person with a pet have a higher chance of having these types of parasites or worms or whatever. Is that true? Are these parasites harmful? And you have these symptoms, you get tested. What does someone do when they get tested, and how do they get treated for these things? I mean, honestly, that's kind of terrifying. I'm wormed. Like, what do you do?
With a little health and a little wealth and a lot of love, that's the life that we live. Suits and scrubs.
Hello, everybody! Welcome to another episode of Suits and Scrubs. I'm one of your co-hosts, where we talk about a little bit of health,
a little bit of wealth,
and a lot of love. All right, join with me is my absolutely stunning wife, as you guys know at this point. She is our gut, hormone, and weight management doctor. Fun fact about Emily today, she put, chicken and waffle seasoning on her potatoes? Listen, I can't complain because she made a bomb-ass meal. Like, salmon's one of my favorites, and she really did that justice. But, we were eating the potatoes. It had like a little sweetness to it. And so, I was eating it. I was like, what? It's like, what is on these potatoes? and I never, have you guys heard of, what is it, chicken and waffle seasoning?
It's a flavor god seasoning, and they use a bunch of different natural, real ingredients, turmeric.
Because we do that here.
And I was just trying to change it up a little bit.
Yeah, you did. You did. It caught me by surprise. It was delicious. Honestly, it was really, really good. I was just caught off surprise. I had a little tickle on my tongue. I'm like, oh, what is that? Anyway, to you, Em.
For those of you who don't know, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Zachary, SVP, and he will show you how to retire before 40.
Whoop, whoop.
Fun fact about him is that he has changed it up a little bit today, and he is looking like a college professor.
Yes, I am.
I'm digging the look. It looks good.
She likes this look. It's a little preppy for me, but hey, I like to switch it up, as you guys know by this point, if you keep watching us, right?
Variety is the spice of life.
It is. So guys, we have a really special one for you today. I would say probably Ozempic's the number one question, but this is probably a fast number two. We have more people asking us about this trend. It's all over TikTok. So we really want to bring this to you today. So Emily's done a lot of research prior to with her medical background. So we're going to really dive into the episode. By the end of this episode, you'll understand what a parasite is. You may think you know what it is, but do you know what these worms can do to your gut microbiome? Are they safe? I
guess you'll have to find out.
Cleanses, the whole thing, guys. We're going to take you through the whole journey. Sit back, relax, check it out. We're going to walk through. So the first segment we have today is our refactions.
Question number 4, Dr. Islam. Talk to me about gut parasites. So I see this everywhere on social media. People are always talking about gut parasites, or they feel like they have parasites inside the GI tract, or other clinicians are testing themselves and other people for parasitic infections, wondering if something is going on there. So let me kind of give you the lowdown on what we know. So, unless you live in a country that has a predominance of parasites that are there, so for example, maybe South America, maybe in India, maybe in Asia, or maybe in Sub-Saharan Africa, these are areas that have a lot of parasites that are there. They can cause a lot of gut issues. But if you live in West Texas, if you live in Texas, there's a very unlikely chance that you have a parasite. It's just a matter of the way things are. Now,
all right. So what is your reaction to that?
So I think, first of all, it's important to say that people are passionate about their gut parasites. Very
Why?
Passionate. It is a thing. It's a thing on social media. I think a lot of people who fall into the more alternative medicine, maybe functional medicine, but I would say more of the kind of like the herbal medicine realm are very passionate about gut parasites. And if you look at the comments on this poor functional doctor's YouTube video, him just saying that, I feel like it's the kiss of death when you publicly will say, especially if you're a functional medicine, I think he's a functional medicine GI specialist, but if you say that, you're going to make a lot of people angry if you say that that really worms or parasites are a thing in third world countries. And I think it's important to get to know a little bit more about the research and the specifics. And so I'm not going to really tell you where I stand.
I'm
going to give you a little teaser until
so guys, stay
we get
tuned
to
to the end of the
end.
episode because I'm actually want to know what you think about this. Again, Emily's done a lot of research on this topic, and based on her functional medicine practicing and being a doctor, I mean, she knows a lot about this topic. So this is going to be exciting for me. I'm actually, and I have not seen the script, guys, so I'm kind of learning with you guys. Okay, so and I have a story, but I'll share that later. Okay, so the second segment is reviewing the stool study results. So guys, we did a 30-day challenge, as you guys know. Every 30 days we do a new challenge, and it's in our specific field. So this month we're doing our budget. Do you want to give a quick shout on where you are with our budget?
It's not easy to follow the budget. I think especially now that we're both working full time again, and we're kind of playing catch up from some personal life circumstances where it just feels like we're constantly spinning our wheels, and it's hard not to go the easy route and maybe order Instacart to get those groceries delivered, which I did do last night because I was working late and doing research and scripting for the podcast today. So I mean, sometimes you have to spend that extra money.
Right.
But it's I think that's our biggest struggle right now is the grocery bill.
Yeah, I think so too. And actually, it's so funny. I was talking to Em about this earlier, and I got some really terrible personal news, which I'll share at a future date and time. But I told Em, I said, I wasn't really going to drink for this episode. As you guys know, it's a recorded date night, right? This is date night for us. This is date night. This is how we do things differently. And so I told her, I said, I just want to order Instacart and get some Trulies or some seltzers delivered to us. We're not sponsored by Trulies, but Trulies, if you're watching, you want to sponsor us? Great. Anyway, and she looked at me and she said, well, she's managing the budget now. She said, well, we're $30 over on our grocery budget for next week. I'm like, shit. So I got in the car, threw on a tank top, and I went to the closest gas station. And I did it, I saved us probably about $20, but at this point and you got ready and you fixed the studio and things like that. So at the end of the day, it's, I didn't really buy any time. I just was being lazy. So, so that's our 30-day update. So that's our 30-day update. And these guys kind of stack, so bear with us. Our other 30-day update is we took the Acromantia supplement. We've been very inconsistent with that. I'm just going to be fully transparent.
Well, you have. I have not.
She has.
I've been taking it every single day.
So maybe you should do another test. So we got our test results back. Tell us what's in there.
And for both of us, it showed we had gut dysbiosis, which is not, I don't think it's surprising. I mean, I have always had IBS issues since I was in high school probably. And so I always feel like my gut is off, and then all the stress from residency, the stress from working as a primary care doctor, switching from days to nights, that we definitely did not eat the best. And then alcohol. I mean, there are a lot of reasons, especially when we first did the test, for our gut to be out of whack and for us to have kind of a maybe not so great balance in our microbiome. So it was a good starting point. It did show that our Akkermansia level was really low, like bottom of the barrel low, a lot, among other things, among other good strains. And then it showed that I think for both of us, our yeast, our fungi level was high. And so it's about the balance. So some of the good bacteria was at a normal level. Some of the bad bacteria was at a high level. It was just and the gut dysbiosis is more just, it's an imbalance of everything. You probably have more of the bad strains and less of the good strains to kind of throw things off balance.
Gotcha. No, I think that's helpful. And I think if you guys are watching us for the first time, this is the first time you're hearing about this, we do a whole episode on gut microbiome, Akkermansia, so check that out. We're not going to divulge it here, but it's a great topic and a great segue to our main discussion. So, first question I have is, what is a parasite and how does it impact your microbiome?
So a parasite is really just an organism that lives off of another organism and doesn't really give it any give it anything back. It doesn't provide any benefit. There's not a mutualistic relationship there. So basically a parasite is like a freeloader.
So not like a lichen or a symbiosis relationship where they do benefit from two. You surprised to know that?
Well, at least that's the traditional definition of a parasite. Whether or not there's some benefit is up for debate today.
So you said they're freeloaders. So what's in your gut harmony? What's in your gut garden that makes up the entire kind of gut microbiome?
Yeah, I think we focus a lot on the bacteria, but the microbiome is made up of several microorganisms. It's not just bacteria. It's fungi, like yeast. It's protozoa, parasites, viruses. And so I think the bacteria really is what gets all of the headlines. The bacteria is what gets the majority of the research. But I think we're starting to see more and more how fungi and parasites can have a role as well.
Interesting. So anything else you want to share about like what is a parasite?
So, I mean, we can get a little bit more into the specifics. There are typically, especially if you're talking about the parasites in the gut, there are two different subtypes. And so there are the typical, I think what people think of when they think parasites would be the helminths, which are the worms. And then there are also the other kind of class of parasites, the protozoa, which are single-celled organisms. So the naked eye cannot see these types of parasites. It's more the worms, which are not single-celled organisms that people can see,
right,
and that you hear all these horror stories about, and that people are so grossed out about, and rightly so, that they've got a bunch of moving worms in their gut.
Well, the thing is, I actually had a conversation with someone that I know, and I had a long conversation, and there's two questions I want to ask on this. It's totally random. If you don't know, it's fine. I'm putting you on the spot. So one is, she was telling me that she deworms every quarter. You know, I know you know what I'm talking about, but it doesn't matter who it is. I don't, you know. But it's our house manager. Hey, Claire, I'm gonna go ahead and call you out. There's no inside jokes here on the show. We love you, by the way. And so she said she deworms every quarter. And I was like looking at her like, what? Which I know we're talking about in just a second. But she says that any person with a pet have a higher chance of having these types of parasites or worms or whatever. Is that true? And then we can get more into details later. I know we have more information on that.
Yeah, and I think we are susceptible to certain things that our animals aren't susceptible to, and vice versa. And so they might be susceptible to certain types of infections that we might not necessarily catch. Not to say that we can't, but I would say that's one of those areas, those gray areas. And some of the naturopaths do say that if you have pets, you're at higher risk, and you need to.
Oh wow! So there is some truth to that. Okay, all right. Well, I guess I'll ask that question at the end, so that way, because we got to set the stage and give some more information.
Yeah.
All right. So, are these parasites harmful?
I think it's up for debate. So initially, that was the thought, that these parasites only suck nutrients from us and they give us nothing back. They only cause symptoms. They only cause disease and torment. And they don't actually do anything for us. And it's interesting. There is something called the hygiene hypothesis, where if you think about it, I think it makes a lot of sense. But the fact that when we live in a industrialized area, we're in the U.S., there's clean drinking water in most places. A lot of us are germaphobes. I mean, there's hand washing to the point where we're not exposed to really anything. We're not exposed to a lot of bacteria. And there's this increase because of that, because we're not exposed, there's this increase in allergies and autoimmune conditions. So when we are exposed to these antigens or these certain bacteria or viruses or fungi or parasites, we have this profound response. Where if you think about people who are more endemic to those areas, who live in third world countries, or who live in countries like when you go to Mexico, for example, and you can't eat the produce there, you can't drink the water there because you're going to get traveler's diarrhea. You're going to come home with Montezuma's revenge.
What is traveler's diarrhea? Is it like...
It's usually...
I know what it is. Yeah, I know, but, you know.
It's usually a variation of E. coli of some sort. And people that live in Mexico or people that live in those areas are able to drink and eat that just fine without it causing issues. It's just us who have no exposure to it. And it's kind of like the adage to rub some dirt on it or to let your kids play in the dirt. I think we are so concerned about cleanliness in our country sometimes that you're doing some people a disservice.
I don't know if the crunchy moms are going to like this one, but I don't know. I mean, if you ground, a lot of crunchy moms like ground and they don't wear shoes and they put their feet on the ground. You know, I think having a little bit of a naturalist, some crunchy moms actually don't, shower every day, maybe shower once a week. And I've even seen some crunchy moms shower once a month. In fact, they put limes underneath their arms for deodorant, and I'm just like, well, like we're moving to that lifestyle, but I stink without deodorant. So like within a day, and I don't know if limes are going to do the trick. Sorry, Crunch. Sorry, Crunch.
Well, even I think we were talking about this too, about studies that show families that hand wash their dishes instead of using a dishwasher, especially if they're using a dishwasher and putting it on sanitize, they tend to have a better balanced microbiome because they're exposing to that kind of the less harmful bacteria by not completely killing off everything.
Okay. I was today years old that washing dishes is beneficial for your gut microbiome.
Hand washing dishes. My bad.
And if you guys heard this, let us know what country, what time, what date. Let us know in the comments. If this is something you learned, let us know because I was today years old on that. All right.
That's our new segment.
That is
I was today years old.
I was today years old. All right. Well, what else do you want to talk about as far as the gut microbiome and the parasites and how that impacts? Anything else?
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like right now there are a lot of conflicting studies because there are a lot of studies that show the negative protozoa or parasites that people have in their gut microbiome that tend to be tied to things like inflammatory bowel disease. So like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, they might have certain types of protozoa or parasites that are in their stool or in their gut microbiome compared to people who are healthy that don't have those conditions. Whereas there are some other studies that show there are certain types of parasites that they find in people that have a positive correlation. So they have a smaller waist circumference or a lower BMI, or they're less likely to have metabolic syndrome when they have these specific types of parasites in their gut microbiome. And so I think we're learning more and more. And there are also some up and coming studies talking about the benefits of parasites and how they're actually utilizing them for therapeutic options. And then also talking about kind of how they play off of different bacteria. So certain parasites can actually decrease some of the effects of some of the bad bacteria that can cause problems in your gut.
How does that work?
It's probably just a matter of balance, probably killing off or taking up space so that
nutrients or whatever, right?
So that these other bacteria aren't able to flourish. And I'm sure I'm really simplifying things by saying that, but I think we're seeing that there are some positives to parasites.
All right. So we talked about what parasites are. We talked about, what impact they have. Now, what are the negative or symptoms that these parasites could have?
So and we learn about this all in traditional medicine and medical school about the different types of disease or infections that can ensue with certain types of parasites. And so I mentioned kind of living in developing countries versus developed countries. So in developing countries, especially in areas where the climate is warmer, there is more of a predisposition to having the worm type of parasites. And usually it has to do with unsanitary conditions, people going to the bathroom outdoors, not having access to clean drinking water. So those are definitely much more prevalent in those areas. And not to say that you can't get any of those worms here in the US. So pinworms, I think probably a lot of mothers who have kids that like to play out in the dirt have experienced issues with pinworms before.
I never heard of pinworms. I heard of tapeworms. Now, is tapeworms a parasite?
They are tapeworms. We don't really have as much here in the U.S. If you travel, I mean, that's a whole nother
I see
ball
tapeworms
game.
all the time.
Tapeworms?
Yes. No, not tapeworms. I'm sorry, ringworm. No. Sorry, pinworms. Are pinworms ringworms?
No. So ringworm actually isn't technically a worm. It's actually a
Parasite?
fungal infection.
It's a fungus. Okay.
But it's the way that it looks. It's that ring, and it kind of looks like a worm on your skin, but it's technically not a parasite or a worm.
See, I'm just the common dude, common person. And when we're talking about pinworms and tapeworms.
I was today years old when I found out my husband had tapeworms.
Oopsies. No, I never had tapeworms, guys. I never had tapeworms. You looked at me weird. I'm like, oh shit, what did I say?
I was shocked.
My bad. So, all right. So as far as, so ringworms, fungi. So what are pinworms?
So pinworms, it's a type of parasite that that's not uncommon for people in the U.S., especially like small children. And the telltale sign is like children who have an itchy butt. They have an itchy butthole. And that's kind of like one of the main symptoms. And we don't have kids yet, but you can leave a comment below if you're a mother and you have small children, like how many of you have experienced the wrath of pinworms.
So this is actually a real common thing then. Do dogs have that? Is that why they always walk across the carpet?
I think dogs are much more likely to have worms or parasites than humans are.
Gotcha. So if we see a child walking across the carpet, we know they go, oh, pinworms. I'm just kidding. All right. So tapeworms. Tapeworms are some of the most interesting things because I think we all have seen the memes or the videos of animals or even human beings. Like this one guy, I think it was in Africa or whatever, and he had a tapeworm so bad he was wrapping around his arm, and people thought he was some sort of mythical like sea creature, and I swear that's what the meme said or whatever. Which I don't understand. Why don't you just cut the tapeworm? Like if it's coming out of you, just like cut it off. Like I don't understand like why you can't do that. And I've seen like bears or like other animals that have like long tapeworm. We've all seen it, guys.
I don't know what I'm just
weird.
You're watching.
Yeah, maybe I'm just weird, but I've seen that. So what are exactly tapeworms?
There are. I think there was a Dr. Oz and Oprah special where they talk about tapeworms. And I think it was a very scary trend for a little while where there were women who were actually wanting to infect themselves with tapeworms because they basically stay in your colon and they starve you of all your nutrients and they help you lose weight. And so there were these extreme dieters that were using tapeworms. This is not anything that we would ever condone. This is not a healthy way to lose weight. Mm-hmm. But that was a thing for a little while. I don't know if it still is. I hope it's not still a thing. Yeah. But that's a way that people in the U.S. could end up with tapeworms if they,
like self-infect?
Yes.
So, but how did how do tapeworms work? They just like connect to yourself and...
There's usually a life cycle. So usually the way that you get infected is not... You don't actually see the worms. You don't actually eat the worms. It's the eggs that somehow you ingest, whether it's from contamination on surfaces or if it's from eating certain types of foods, certain types of worms you can get from undercooked food. So there are different ways that you can get the eggs, and then they end up hatching in your digestive tract, and then they will grow. So in every type of parasite and worm, their life cycle is a little bit different. Mm-hmm. But those are the ones that I think people are most afraid of, are the actual worms. And if you go on mission trips, if you go traveling, if you go to certain areas, you're certainly at risk for them. And so I think that raises a suspicion of if you're having intestinal symptoms, whether it's just abdominal pain, diarrhea. I would say those are probably the most common symptoms. Having nutrient deficiencies over time because these parasites are taking your nutrients. Iron deficiency, anemia for certain types of parasites you can see. So there are definitely the typical GI symptoms that you would notice, but some of the other symptoms are kind of nonspecific, like fatigue, right. Headaches, and I think that's why a lot of people are so afraid that they have parasites, that they have issues, because there are a lot of nonspecific symptoms and they can't really figure out what else is going on.
Right. So they're really tired, or you have GI issues. It could be like ultra processed foods, or not getting enough sleep, or drinking alcohol, which we are doing today.
Or people have bowel movements and they'll see, you can have mucus or food products in your stool that might look kind of like the shell of a worm or an egg.
Oh God, that'd be terrifying.
But unless you see stuff moving in there,
Right.
and that's a generalization, but I think,
Do you think everyone looks at their poop before they flush?
I don't know, let's take a poll.
Do you?
I mean, I am a medical professional, and so I feel
So
like
you have to. It is your duty. It is your pledge allegiance to your flag.
I want to
I'm
make
looking
sure.
at my poop in the toilet.
I want to make sure, because your poop can tell you a lot.
Oh, got you.
If your poop is black, if you have blood in it,
Right. But light colored poops are good, right? That means you're losing weight.
not necessarily.
Oh, geez. Yeah. I mean, I'm
We could have a whole nother episode on
poop.
how your poop looks.
Actually, we should probably bring Jessica Sang on,
We
who's a
should.
GI specialist. You know, Jessica, if you're watching, hi. Okay, anyway, so we got off topic there. But okay, but no, it's on topic, off topic. So let's talk about the testing. So you talked about the symptoms. So what if you're like, oh man, I feel like I have, and then of course if you travel, and I feel like a lot of doctors' offices, like, have you traveled recently? And
Yeah.
I think they ask that question, and I think that's probably why. But talk about the testing if you feel like you might have this.
Yeah, if you're getting traditional testing at a typical office, they typically will do some form of stool testing, and in the stool you can actually look under a microscope, look for the eggs, or actually look for the parasites in a stool sample, or you could do something similar to what we did, like the full analysis to see kind of what your balance looks like if you have certain types of parasites. And our Thorn study did check for, and I didn't mention, so it checked for things like E. histolytica and Giardia, and these are the single-celled organisms, the protozoa that I was talking about, not the worms, but it was checking for all of the different typically things like the single-celled organisms. Those are the types of parasites that are more common in the U.S. So you can have Giardia, you can have
Do we have any?
Cryptosporidium. We didn't have any of those, but technically the way that it says your results on the Thorn results, it mentions your Giardia level was normal, or your E. histolytica level was normal, or your Cryptosporidium was normal. So it doesn't say that it wasn't there. It just says that the level was normal, which I think is an interesting way of putting it. But
Yeah. And guys, we're not sponsored by Thorn. We did do this test, and and part of this whole journey, we will share with you guys. We'll do tests and things that are more aligned to functional medicine, and we'll come back and report out on what we do. Like, we're actually doing a major product review right now, and we're moving from our traditional products into endocrine disruptor products. That's going to be hot. We haven't dropped that episode yet. We've already done all the research pretty much, and we're doing that now. So some more to come on that. Subscribe if you want to know more. Anyway, all right. Let's say that you did travel to one of these countries, and let's say a mission trip. A lot of our family and friends do mission trips, which I love them for it. And you have these symptoms, and you get tested. What does someone do when they get tested, and how do they get treated for these things? 'Cause, honestly, that's kind of terrifying. I'm wormed. Like, what do you do?
yeah, so that's only, and we didn't mention kind of the rest of the tests. So stool testing is one test. You can also sometimes see evidence of it on blood work. So depending on how long you've had issues, or even if it's a new infection, there are certain types of blood cells or white blood cells called eosinophils that can be high. If you have a parasitic infection, there are also your blood counts. If you have a certain type of parasite that's basically kind of taking all of your nutrients, and so you can be anemic, or you can have an iron deficiency. And so those are other things that kind of point in a direction of a serious type of parasitic infection. And if you do have one of those parasitic infections, even if it's something that's not quite as severe like pinworm, there are specific types of pharmaceutical treatments that you can take to help treat the parasites. There are certain like mebendazole and albendazole, and for the single-celled organisms, things like Flagyl can help treat. But there are definitely, just kind of like there are antibiotics that treat the overgrowth of bacteria, there are also kind of the anti-parasitic medications as well.
So it sounds like to me there's nothing truly like invasive. You just do medications to really take care of that.
As long as it doesn't get to and we don't see that in the U.S. where you have such a high burden of worms that it can be life-threatening, or that those worms spread to other areas of your body, or even killing off those worms sometimes can cause like an immune reaction. And I'm not saying that to to scare people, but we don't see that type of parasitic infection here in the US.
Gotcha.
And so it's not the acute life-threatening kind of parasitic infection that you might see elsewhere.
You know, we got watchers in the UK and New Zealand and Australia. So, hey guys, if you're watching us from there, we actually do got watchers there. Same story, or just
if it's in a developing country versus a developed country, it's always in those areas where it's more of a like poor sanitation. Especially if that's mixed with being a warmer environment. But if you're in typically the UK and New Zealand, I mean, those are all developed countries. Those are all industrialized countries. So I would say they don't see the same type of issues that we have.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of lean into that because I was looking at the analytics. Like, oh God, we got people from all over the world. That's kind of fun. Do we want to talk about the parasite cleanses?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big issue, right?
Or maybe it's our bonus. Should we say that at the bonus?
Well, that was the main. I think a lot of people ask us to talk about parasite cleanses and are interested in doing parasite cleanses, and so that was kind of the main catalyst for today's episode, just to do some research on it. And there are all sorts of clinicians out there who are saying that you should do parasite cleanses. Typically, they have their own parasite cleanse that they say that you can do, and it'll rid your body of all.
Fancy that.
Yeah. So they have their own supplement line, and not to say that it can't sometimes help. I think the takeaway, and I don't want to get hate mail from a bunch of people who say that, and it's the term gaslighting, that clinicians or physicians are gaslighting patients who know that they have parasites or they know that they have a gut issue and they're doing all these tests and they can't find anything and they're just saying there's nothing wrong with you. And I can understand that feeling of being defeated, that you know that something's wrong and your complaints aren't being validated. But I think when we did our thorn analysis, it did show maybe that we had an imbalance. And I think you should think of things like a seesaw. You shouldn't think I need to absolutely kill all of the parasites in my gut, specifically because we're finding more and more now that there are potentially some benefits from certain types of parasites. Mm-hmm. And I think the focus should be on the microbiome as a whole.
Right.
We should be building up the good stuff and eliminating the bad stuff. And when you do that and you're putting more of the good, it's giving you a better balance of that seesaw. You're able to balance things out, and that bacteria is able to take up the space where some of those bad parasites would have taken up.
Gotcha.
And so trying to push those bad bacteria and bad parasites out. And I think we apparently had fungal overgrowth. And I think that's a huge area of study and treatment right now, is trying to diminish the fungal. And we could do a whole episode on that. We're not really talking about fungi or Candida or thrush today, but.
Right. But let us know, guys, if you guys are interested in hearing about these topics. Like at this point, we're probably, when this episode airs, like we've recorded about 40 different episodes. And so our website should be live by the time this is going live, and we should be getting great questions from y'all. We want to hear from y'all. We want y'all to pick the topics, right? That's where we're going with this. And we'll still do these topics that are fun for us. And in fact, the reason why we're doing this is because we got asked about. So interesting. So a segue I have is, it's not really a segue, but really the next question. So you talk about supplements, and well, we'll do the, does Emily take a stand at the end? Okay. Mm-hmm. So as far as supplements, what supplements can people take to combat some of this? The gut microbiome as a whole, like not maybe specifically parasites.
Yeah. I mean, I think we see a lot of correlation and maybe not necessarily causation. So certain types of parasites we see with a good correlation, and certain we see with a bad. And I think a lot of that probably has to do with the lifestyle that you're living and the foods that you're eating. So if you're eating more of a plant-based or a whole foods diet, you are probably shifting the balance in a positive direction to where we see only these maybe positive types of parasites that predominate, versus just kind of like we see with bacteria as well. And so I think if you're eating a lot of plants, if you're eating foods that have probiotics, fermented foods, prebiotics, so lots of fiber-rich fruits and veggies, I think that will help you to naturally get rid of some of the the overgrowth of bad parasites. But there are some, if you think about herbal medicine, there actually are some studies that show that certain types of herbs can be anti-parasitic. And so we can kind of go through the list. But I think it's important to say these have potential benefits, but also say what the potential downsides could be, because it's important that you are not over-treating yourself. You're not taking too much of an herb,
right? Because
there are always just because it's an herb, just like you can find berries on a tree, and just because they're naturally growing in the universe, they could be poisonous berries.
Right.
So you don't, just because it's an herb and because it's something that's natural that grows out of the ground does not mean it's good for you.
Right. I think that's fair. And I think, resetting your gut microbiome is probably what your message is, right? And, we can talk more about that at the end. Before we jump in these supplements, though, you believe food is medicine. And that's where really it should start. Like, supplements should enhance, not replace. So anything you want to add there? Like, anything you developed?
I mean, I think that's the safest way, is to use food, because when you're using food, it's in normal amounts. You're not getting toxic levels. When you're doing supplements, sometimes it's very concentrated and you're getting a lot more than what you would normally get, which that can sometimes be a good thing, because you don't want to eat a whole wheelbarrow full of broccoli sometimes. So, I mean, sometimes supplements, I think, can be beneficial. But I do have in my ebook, which I think you're getting at, is I have a meal plan and a kind of a jumpstart program to help to at least start the process of improving your gut microbiome.
Yeah. Well, we're on it. I mean, look at Emily's skin. Like, people say this all the time. It's like, oh my gosh, she has the best skin. She has this. And my skin, I think my skin's pretty good too, but, probably because of this one right here. I think, Emily heals you from the inside out. That's probably things that we focus on. And we are on her, we do prebiotics, probiotics, and we make sure that we are trying to give our gut harmony. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that's the really good advice. You just don't focus. So yeah, you want to walk through these supplements before we jump into this?
Yeah, and so I think this is the biggest one. This is something I've heard from patients too, is wormwood. The name is very fitting.
Is that not Matilda's dad? Wormwood. I think it's Wormwood.
You would know. You love that movie.
I do. Like Mrs. Trunchbull, when she screams Wormwood, when her car breaks down, she picks up that bad boy. All right, so Wormwood, talk to me.
So wormwood, I think is one that's come out, or that's most popular among these detoxes. So studies have shown that it can be effective in treating various parasites like Giardia, which is probably the most common parasite here in the U.S. And Giardia is the parasite that, at least this is how we learned it in medical school, that you could associate with people that go camping and they drink like the unclean water if they're out by a lake and they don't have filtered water. And then you end up with very profuse, kind of greasy, smelly diarrhea. That's probably Giardia. But anyway, apparently wormwood can... Greasy.
That's a really weird way.
There are certain kind of like words, or like kind of ways that exams, like the board exams, ask you questions that make you think, oh, this is, they've got to be talking about Giardia here, because there are these kind of like taglines or words. Greasy and foul smelling, as if diarrhea is ever not foul smelling.
Right.
But anyway, so those are the potential evidence says that it can potentially decrease. I said potential like 5 times, can decrease the growth of Giardia. But they're also, if you take it in high doses, it can be toxic and can cause nausea, vomiting, dizziness, seizures, apparently, if you take it in high enough of a dose. Black walnut is another herb.
Wait a minute, before we jump into black walnut, so wormwood, like, is there any natural ways to get this?
Artemisia, I feel like it's not something that naturally grows here in the U.S. I would think if you're going to get it here, you would, maybe if you lived abroad, you'd be able to find it growing kind of in its natural habitat. Gotcha. But I don't think, I think if you took it here in the U.S., you would have to probably buy a supplement of some sort.
So black walnut. Black
walnut is another. So the hulls of black walnut can apparently have anti-parasitic activity on intestinal parasites, but it also can cause upset stomach, diarrhea, allergic reactions.
Is it really a walnut? It's just black walnut?
I honestly don't know. We should look at the pictures and put it up during our episode so people can see what it actually looks like.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
But it's something that you obviously can't just go and buy at the grocery store here.
Gotcha. So you have to these are supplements.
Most of them. And then it also mentions liver damage, cloves. I think we've all kind of know how to access or where to get cloves, but that apparently has some anti-parasitic properties. Not as many of the potential dangerous side effects there. Garlic is another one. Grapefruit seed extract and pumpkin seeds. So, I mean, some of these things you can just eat as a part of your diet. I honestly do not know what neem is, but that's another one that I saw on several of the kind of evidence-based studies. Berberine, oil of oregano, and olive leaf. Those are other ones. But I think if you're able to incorporate some of these natural herbs into your cooking, that can certainly be helpful. But some of these, like I said, that you're taking as supplements, and one of the biggest things that we see with herbals is liver damage. So just because, like I said, just because it's natural and just because it grows out of the ground and it's not a pharmaceutical does not mean there aren't potential dangers. Just kind of like ashwagandha. There are some cases, ashwagandha is a very popular...
Ashwagandha.
It's a popular herb that's in a lot of these anxiety type supplements to help with calm your nerves and calm anxiety. And at really high levels, it can potentially cause liver toxicity. It's actually we take Nutrafol supplements, and it actually has ashwagandha in our Nutrafol, in our multivitamin.
Those are not cheap, and we're not sponsored by them either.
But I digress. I think, but that's the whole point is some of these can potentially help with detox, at least minimizing the growth of certain types of parasites in your gut. And if you're doing it in small amounts and you're kind of helping with that balance, I think is one thing. So for people who are doing kind of safe cleanses, are those, and the other thing to consider too, are those cleanses also kind of helping to eliminate, like you're not eating processed foods when you're doing cleanses. Right. They're usually more plant-based. And so are you just kind of giving your body a little bit of a break? And are you helping also the good bacteria flourish during those cleanses? Is it truly that you're getting rid of all of these parasites, or is it that you're kind of just helping to restore balance?
Yeah. Interesting.
And so I think that's maybe one way to think about it.
Yeah. And it's also too, it's really hard to test some of these things, right? And you have to do really extensive testing, and the testing's not cheap. And so, if you're at the end of the rope, you're like, hey, I really think something's wrong with me. This is something that's a hot topic. I want to do a parasites cleanse just because I want to be more natural, but there's some things to think about there, right? Mm-hmm. I think gut harmony is really what you're saying.
Yes. And this is something that it'll probably take us down a whole rabbit hole. But for example, ivermectin was something really big during the COVID pandemic that some of these naturopaths were saying could help cure COVID infection. And some people are using this as cleanses to kill all the parasites in their gut. And they're getting like horse ivermectin. They're getting, because you do have to have a prescription for it. So they're getting it through like veterinary pharmacies that you don't have to have a prescription and taking it themselves.
Jeez.
And I feel like it can get dangerous by doing that. And just like taking antibiotics, if you don't want to take antibiotics because that's killing off the good bacteria with the bad bacteria. So you want to be judicious with that as well. And so I think you should really be cautious with trying to, I know the thought of having worms wiggling around in your gut is very, very triggering for people, and understandably so, but don't think that you need to just completely clean out your system. And this is the last thing that I'm going to say. Colonoscopies. And Jessica Sang could probably give us some extra tidbits here as well, but I've, with my own eyes, seen colonoscopies and see a camera in the colon, and there aren't a bunch of worms wiggling around in there. And a lot of Americans get colonoscopies. They have to get it for just their routine cancer screening. And so I don't think that we're just walking around with a bunch of worms wiggling around in our gut. I think there's a potential that there's the protozoa, those other types of parasites are there.
But you can't see anyway.
But I don't think that we all are just riddled with worms.
Gotcha.
That's my 2 cents. That's my take on gut parasites.
Gut parasites. So how do we ensure like long-term gut health? Make sure we restore balance, and then we'll do at the end, like, where do you stand on this? I think you already told us.
If it's not obvious already. I think the biggest take home is nourish your gut by avoiding processed foods, avoiding artificial sweeteners, certain types of artificial sweeteners, avoiding certain types of environmental toxins, avoiding alcohol. Those are probably the big ones. Stress, trying to manage your stress, making sure you're getting the appropriate sleep, eating lots of natural occurring probiotics and prebiotics, avoiding antibiotic use. I think that's like what you should be constantly doing to try to make sure that your gut is in balance, whether it's bacteria or fungi. And we can go down into that other realm, the fungi realm, on another episode.
If people are interested, yeah, for sure. I'm actually interested because you told us our test that we actually did have some overgrowth. So I'd love to see what that impact does.
And it's usually an indicator of a high sugar diet.
Oh,
because
that's weird because I feel like we don't eat a lot of sugar anyway.
But when we did the test, we've been a lot healthier the last couple months at least.
For sure, a lot healthier. All right, Emily, people want to know. Take a stand. Parasite cleanses, yay or nay?
I don't think that you should be paying money to someone who's peddling supplements to do a parasite cleanse.
Dang, girl, just getting.
I am not saying that people do not have imbalances and that they might have parasites in their gut that are contributing to some of their symptoms.
So we're gonna say no parasite cleanses, but gut harmony.
Yes,
that's what you're saying.
Yeah, it's not an all or nothing thing. It's you do the right things, do the building blocks. It's just like when you're trying to lose weight. You don't do a crash diet, you don't do a fad diet. It's you change the lifestyle,
right? And
you try to minimize the exposure to certain things.
Yeah. Okay. All right, guys, you heard it first. That has been another episode of Suits and Scrubs. We're talking about a little bit of health,
a little bit of wealth,
and a lot of love. Until next time, guys.
Bye.
He's on the hustle, she's on the grind. There's no time to kill. From saving lives and new deadlines, and there's some holes to fill. With a little health and a little wealth and a lot of love. That's a life that we live. Suits and Scrubs.